Again, good afternoon, everybody. It's Douglas coming to you from Cape Town. Today we're talking to Sue, and Sue is in Hampshire in the south of England, and it's a lovely sunny day. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Douglas. How are you?
Oh, I'm very good. So, except for one thing, I will be sending a photo out later, but I did manage to break a surfboard last night. Big wave came and ate up my board. It was rather sad. Had to go swimming onto the rocks to get it.
Does that mean your knee is feeling better?
It was my rehab board, so it actually means that now I can go back to my short performance boards because I haven't got a big board anymore. Good way of avoiding the question. Yeah, my knee is much better. Sue, so you are very involved in the Be Activated community, and we're doing a lot of wonderful things together. So first of all, just tell us a little bit about you and your story and how you kind of got hooked in with all of us crazy people.
Well, it was purely by luck, as so many things are. One of my colleagues who I work with was looking for some CPD hours and noticed you were doing a course in Poole Hospital down in Dorset. I thought, that's nice and local, looks a bit crazy, a bit interesting. Let's see what that's all about. So Monday morning, he came in absolutely beside himself, having had the best 2 days doing level 1 with you. He had no idea what really to expect, so it made the whole amazingness of it even more amazing, I think. So not wanting to miss out on anything, as I am like that, I was very keen to learn what he did. So he went through as much as he could with me over the next few weeks, and I went through his notes. Very basic.
I remember Steve very clearly from that workshop, because he'd just had hip surgery, and there were all these things he shouldn't and couldn't and wouldn't do, and suddenly he could.
Yeah, and it was so cool, and it was something so different as well. Which, when I've been a physio for 30 years, it's a long time. So when you come up, and it's always, every course you go on is a variant of the same or similar. This was completely different, and it was asking us to think of the body and how it moves in a completely different way, putting new glasses on, and that was fantastic. It was exciting. So lots of YouTube clips, and as I know it makes you laugh, getting rid of my Hello magazine at the end of the day in bed and putting my earphones on and listening to YouTube clips and hear you talking. And then eventually you came back over and I did the level 1. And then I've done so many since. So
well, I actually remember. I think you also got the DVD or CD-ROM program, because when we first met on the level 1, your check-in, I remember it clearly, because you were going, oh, and this has happened and that has happened. I'm like, you've not done the course yet. No, I got YouTube and DVDs and this is what I've done. And I'm like thinking, wow, this is so cool. Just wait.
Yeah. And it was amazing. And then before doing the level 1 course, Steve said, you do these activation points for 20, 30 seconds. And I can remember in my clinic looking at the clock as I was doing the activations for 20, 30 seconds, thinking some magic that was going to happen. But you have to start somewhere. And of course, level 1 made everything fit into place. And it's just been an amazing journey. And now all the physios who work with me have all done your courses. We all do activations. Very rarely does a patient leave the clinic who hasn't had activations done on them.
And it's kind of changed what happens when you guys take lunch or the breaks that you have. Hey, I hear a lot about this.
So our receptionists have now banned us from talking about amazing stories for the whole of our lunch break. She times us now, because you meet up at lunchtime and it's like, how was your morning? Oh my God, you cannot believe what's just happened. Oh, this patient. And it was just so exciting. And tears, lots of patients coming out in tears, as often happens. But also on the flip side of the coin, patients that don't respond to what we've been doing. And so we have the benefit, which a lot of you sole practitioners don't have, of having each other to help. So if something isn't working, then we can put it out there and just say, you come across this, what else could I try? And 4 heads are better than 1. So, we all learn just by discussing the successes, but also the tricky ones.
Yeah, well, I think that's a huge thing, and obviously I say obviously, but in February delved into the world of Parkinson's and did a trial. But what we've found is with those 10 people that were on there, is they're staying connected, their community that they've created, and you've been pivotal in that, is also part of the strength. So it's certainly from a perspective for me is inspired me to say, well, actually, the more spaces we can create for practitioners to talk to each other, support each other. You know, we don't just want to say, hey, here's my great story. They're great. We know they're going to be great stories, but we're also going to come up against challenges and things that aren't working. And sometimes somebody offers us a perspective that we hadn't yet considered. And usually it's really straightforward stuff, but we can't always be expected to see it all.
No, definitely. And there's also, again, because there's a group of us doing all this, there's a competitiveness within all of us. So you know, I'll come up with a really good idea, and then Steve comes up with a better one, and that really, you know, really annoys me. I'm on it again, trying to think of something more. So, you know, you're always finding different ways to improve things and just expanding the whole scenario, really, which is just great, really good.
So I think that's awesome, but I have to ask you, because we've also chatted about all of the challenges that are happening now, and you know, it's now becoming normal practice to have all this protective gear, but where you are and what the physio rules are pretty extreme. You know, and so there's all this protective gear, and you know that your clients have got protective gear, you've got protective gear. Did people say to you, Sue, I'm sorry, this is just too difficult. I don't want to come to the practice anymore?
No, the absolute opposite, because the problem was that people were so desperate to be treated that they were just so grateful when we opened. We were one of the first practices to reopen. So people were just so grateful, because some of them had been in agony for 3 months, you know, and you know, they were desperate to be seen and to have some hands-on face-to-face treatment. So they were just really, really pleased that we were almost not putting our neck on the line, but being bold enough to just get on with it. And, you know, you just got to use common sense. It is unusual circumstances, but it's like it for everybody. So there's no point just groaning and moaning about it. Let's just get on with it, you know. So we just made everything as simple as we could, and we reassured people, and we still have a great laugh, and it's not a problem at all.
And we had a Zoom call where Emily, for your daughter, has been helping and doing an amazing job, helping you run the practice as practice manager, and not her job normally, but in these circumstances. And one of the things that Emily was doing right at the start was someone would be standing outside. She'd open the door without her mask on, obviously massively social distancing, go, hello, just so you know, it's Emily here. And they would see a smiling face, not a masked face, and go, I'm going to close the door now, put my mask on. This is the routine we're going to follow. But the first thing they see is a smiling face. I thought that was absolute genius. Yeah,
it worked really, really well, you know, and the next thing you're going to do is point a gun at them to take the temperature.
Yeah.
It's all a bit strange. And now it's got even stranger, because we've just found out as of yesterday that we've now got to wear visors and masks with all patients, unless they've had a COVID test. So, you know, even more gear.
And so how well we manage ourselves becomes so incredibly significant here, because it's so easy for all of these new interesting rules to just overwhelm us. And if we're in overwhelm and we've got a client desperate and in pain, and we're overwhelmed and they pretty much are overwhelmed too, well, you're not adding any value.
Absolutely. And we're now getting patients coming to see us who've had COVID, who have got the post-viral fatigue symptoms, and you test them and they're a 0 straight away. They're a 0, obviously.
and the thing is, have you also noticed how many more zeros there are across the board?
Yeah.
And for if someone were listening to this conversation who's not part of the community, so a 0 in our in our testing system of the 1, 2, 3 is when the body doesn't find an effective way to find hip flexion. And so it's a system in overwhelm. So we generally would say exhaustion, chronic fatigue, post-traumatic stress, but overwhelm. And when we've lived, you know, when the world was first told, hey, this is going to be 1 month, no 2 months, no 3 months, even 3 months is you can get your head around that. Mm. But when it's this extended period which has no ending, it's the marathon that they keep moving the finish line, and nobody knows even if there is a finish line. And that really doesn't serve us, our human need, our need for certainty. So people are fatigued and people are overwhelmed, and we're seeing it in physiology. So, and because we have a testing system, we quickly find that actually this, you know, I've been saying for the last probably 3 or 4 years that zeros are tending to be the most common pattern we're finding, or we're finding more and more zeros in the world, where when I first started teaching the 1, 2, 3 in about 2008, if we got a 0 on a course, that was a big deal. Whoa, now it's such a common pattern. Now, in the last 2020, it's worldwide, it's the biggest thing. And a system that's in overwhelm, in freeze mode, doesn't effectively think, heal, rest, recover, blah, 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 and the list goes on. So just bringing them out of that, even if you bring them into not a perfect pattern, it's just it's a higher functional level than a 0.
Definitely. The interesting thing also, though, is because COVID is a breathing respiratory issue, patients are much more sometimes it's easier to get them to realize the importance of breathing because it's very current. So now if someone comes in with an arthritic knee and then we start with the breathing, it's much easier to actually explain to them how important it is for so many reasons, not just the knee, but for everything else. So that in a way has almost made it a little bit easier. And the post-COVID patients, we've had great results with just doing the breath work in zone 1, and you can change them from a 0 very quickly and teach them what to do. And they go away with something they can do to help themselves, because there's nothing out there otherwise.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, I think that's it. I think that's the tough challenge. We want to equip people with the tools that they can take care of themselves. We can still do the detail. We can still do the, hey, let's get this niggled, because they can't do that. But if they can get into the self-maintenance and taking care of themselves, it really allows them to almost bring a better version of themselves to the world. Otherwise, you have, you know, an entire city of overwhelmed people just sitting and waiting for someone to tell them what the next rule or the next thing is. And, you know, if for anyone out there, I'd be quite curious if we went and we tested all of our, and I'm saying inverted commas, leaders, our politicians and the people who are driving a whole lot of this, how many of them are 0s too? It's a huge amount of pressure. It's a constantly changing battlefield. And so when we're in a place of overwhelm in our system, it's very hard to make good decisions. And so, you know, I feel sorry for a lot of them, because they're trying to make decisions with really poor information and really disruptive information that changes all the time. And if your system's already overwhelmed, you're just going to pick one and run, you know, and hope that, and sometimes it feels like that. Someone's, you know, flipping a coin going, shall we not? And that doesn't feed into our need for certainty as human beings. That's what's so interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So one of the other things that obviously you and a lot of therapists and trainers, medical people out there had to do was move initially from face-to-face into digital. And even with the Parkinson's, we were quite surprised. Yeah. Just something that was like, oh no, that's terrible. What are we going to do with our study and our trial now? Actually became an awesome challenge, but something that like really demonstrated to us how amazing the body is if we're doing the right things.
Absolutely. I mean, doing Zoom calls with patients throughout lockdown was my idea of hell, because I'm such a hands-on physio. I hate all this remote stuff. But you have to do what you have to do in the circumstances. So you've got to get on with it. And some of the results we got were just incredible. Just I was amazed how much you could advise people to do. remotely. But a lot of what we do in Be Activated is teaching patients how to do things to themselves, how to treat themselves, how to give them the control back over their bodies and facilitate that. And so you're forced into this situation where you can't do it for them. You've actually got to get them to do it themselves. So it was really enlightening from my point of view. And certainly with our Parkinson's group, we ran a trial back in February, and the follow-ups we couldn't do because of the lockdown. So we were doing this remotely once a week, doing Zoom calls with the whole community. And the fun we've had doing it has just been brilliant. We've had such a giggle, and they've all got so much out of it. It's just been amazing. And then if one of them finds something particularly works, they share it with everybody else. So I'm not even there. I'm just creating the space, and they're working with each other, which is just magical.
Well, I think, isn't that what empowerment is? Empowerment is sharing and teaching the tools, and then letting you use them. And sometimes when someone's first using a tool, just like if we're talking a practitioner learning a technique, we don't expect you to be able to use it perfectly the very first time you use it. It's something that the more you use it, the better you get. And the nice thing about having each person, and they call themselves the Parkineers, by the way, for those because they're pioneers, and they really are, and we're very proud of what they've done. Partly because they inspired us too. They've given us energy and kept us going, because it's quite easy to get a bit despondent and down with all the craziness of what you can't do. But then the question is, okay, so now we know what we can't do. What can we do? And it really is so don't pretend, when people are going, don't talk about what you've lost, only talk about what you benefited from. I think that's wrong. I think you have to acknowledge the things that we've lost, because otherwise, did they not have any meaning, or did they not exist? They did exist. But we can talk about what we lost as long as we can balance it out by also looking what we've gained in this. What are the things that it's allowed us to see? So there's a story I know you told me 5 or 6 weeks ago, and I just want to check, because I'll butcher the story, but it's an online story. It's a Parkinson's patient who was an osteopath.
Okay, yeah.
Am I right? An osteopath. Yeah, he's now retired.
He's more than retired. He's in his, I think he's about 80, 79, 80. Yeah.
Had Parkinson's quite a while.
Yeah, a long time. He hasn't stood or walked for over a year. I actually did a session with him yesterday on Zoom, so this is a good timing, Doug. So yeah, he hasn't been on his feet or walked for about a year now. So his wife, who's amazing, still looks after him at home and has to hoist him everywhere. So he can't weight bear to transfer. So even if we could just get him to weight bear to be able to transfer, that would make their life so much easier. So when I first started doing the session with him, again, you said to me, we can do lots remotely. And I'm thinking, yeah, right, okay, I'm not sure about this. So I did this first session with him, and the difference in one session remotely, getting his wife to do the activation points, was incredible. It was just amazing. And
so when you say the difference, tell me what that means.
So lots of things. His eyelids, for instance, he could barely keep his eyelids open. He'd had a conversation with a neurologist, and all they could offer was Botox, and he really didn't want to go down the Botox route. So his eyes were closed for a lot of the talking bit of the assessment. His neck movement was virtually nil. He'd been told he's got osteoarthritis, obviously, and it would never move again. And lifting his arms, he could probably get to just about here, and that was about it. So we worked through zone 1 and various other activation points, like his wife doing all the stuff. His eyelids became open. His speech improved dramatically from quite slurry to incredibly clear. His arms went up this high, so you could see his head through his arms. His neck was moving. We did go into the jaw, and it was at that point he said, "Oh, I thought you were going to get me to do my pterygoids." So as soon as he said pterygoids, I thought he must be medical, because he hadn't told me that he was an osteopath or anything. And of course, as soon as he did, we could talk a different language. And so he had that extra understanding that perhaps other people wouldn't have if they weren't an osteopath.
Yeah.
But he was incredible, and he was in his joy, he was working it, he was amazing. and suddenly his neck could move, and he couldn't stop laughing because he said, I've seen the x-rays, I've had the conversations with the orthopedic surgeons and my colleagues, and I know my neck won't move, but it's
and
moving.
I sided with them. I didn't disagree with anything they said, but it's different anyway.
So, and they've carried on, and then I did a session yesterday, which is a third one.
But hang on. I'm
Okay.
fishing now, because there was something that I remember you saying he said. I can't quite remember, but it was something like about him being an osteopath, very successful osteopath.
Yeah.
And yet somehow what you were sharing with him,
Okay. Yeah,
something like that. I'm going to.
it was something on the lines of, he just said, this all makes sense now. He said it's not just a case of muscles and ligaments and joints. It's looking at what makes all that move, and looking at what drives everything, and getting down to the root cause of everything, and not just the symptoms, and not just looking at where the problem is. Look, you've got to wind it back. You've got to go back to the beginning, to where it all started to go wrong. And he could start to unravel it in his own mind and see what was going on, but also believe that he could, even in his stage where he can't even get out of a chair, to believe that there is a possibility that he could improve. And by the end of that session, he was so much better that it was like a light bulb lit up. It was really amazing. And his wife was, bless her, she was almost in tears. And they've done so much together. They've been great. And then yesterday, he actually pushed on the arms of his chair and lifted his bottom out of the seat. So, I mean, he could barely sit up when we started. And this is just through a few Zoom calls. So this is, you know, it's big stuff, isn't it? It's just a shame he can't come down to the clinic, but one day maybe. If not, we'll just work with what we've got.
But yeah, that's magical. I didn't know about yesterday's session, so that's really. But I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's kind of why do we do what we do? It's for stories like that. It's things like that, and you know, one can go, oh wow, he can lift his butt off the seat. Yeah, but if you've never not been able to do that, and that represents a whole lot of other things that you can't do in your life. And you know, I think the one thing that we learned, or I learned from the Parkinsons, is that the mindset of Parkinson's is it's a slippery slope, and you only go down one way. There's no recovery route. This is the way down, and some parts are more slippery than others, where you have, when it gets bad, then when you recover, it's a plateau on where you landed. It's not pull yourself back. And I think what our group of Parkineers has shown us is that may not be true, because they've been incredible. And
yeah, they really have.
You know, so
they're all told, aren't they? They're all told that it is an accelerated degenerative pattern that's progressive, and the only thing that can help is medication, and then maybe exercise, and that's kind of what's out there. So they've proved to themselves that isn't necessarily the case.
Yeah, and I think that's what's exciting. So, but if we realize that if we step out of Parkinson's, how many other things, whether it be a chronic back pain, whether it be a chronic tennis elbow, a chronic this, a chronic that, you have arthritis. This is the progress of your arthritis and where it goes. And within the realm, or if that line of thinking, you'd have to say, oh, that's right. You know, if I have arthritis, this is it. I remember when I smash my body up a lot. I do a lot of stupid things. I own that. And 5 or 6 years ago, it was getting really, really bad. And I went for an MRI, and it was horrendous. It was like, if my client came in with that, I'd be going, oh crap, what are we going to do? The only problem was that the day before I had the MRI, I had all the pain and I needed to test my system. And so I was holding onto a pommel horse in a gymnastics studio, and I was jumping on a trampoline and filmed it, going, I understand my system is smashed, but why can I do this? And even the radiologist, I went to go chat to her, and she was looking at me and looking at the MRI and looking at me. And she goes, you're Mr. Heel. I said, yes. She goes, that shouldn't be. You shouldn't be standing. And actually, it was so crushed, and my two levels crushed. And I sent a picture to a lady who has helped me a lot. Her name is Jenny, and I was almost, oh, Jenny, give me some energetic stuff. Oh. And she goes, Doug, you're getting on a little bit, lad. That's a pretty normal MRI where I come from. What's your problem? And I was like, I bought into the images that I was seeing, and yet we're so much more than that, you know. And so it took about understanding, and I like what you said about unwinding and going back to causes and looking at what was happening and how I wasn't giving myself the chance to recover between travel, and it was always go, push, and thinking I was letting it go and doing as what I was teaching, but I wasn't doing enough, and I wasn't doing it well enough to let go. But the minute I did, my body went, all right, we can come back. And you know, it got back to beautiful until I did something stupid again. But you know, but that's the amazing thing. We've got so many limiting diagnoses and mindsets. And I think that the thing that I find is, like, what happens if we are just so much more than we think we are?
Absolutely. On all your level 1 and level 2s, we see incredible things, you know, crazy things happen, don't they, on every level, and numerous times. When you think what the body can do, and you look on YouTube and you see all these amazing things that people do around the world and what the body is capable of, we're only tapping into just such a small part of it. So when our clients come in with whatever problem they've got, it's just that there has to be an answer within our system. We've just got to find it. And so it becomes like a whodunit game. And with the 1, 2, 3 and the way you taught us to assess it, we've now got a structure where we can go fishing. And it's all about connections. It's about working what's going on here and just winding back and listening to the story. And it's fun. It's so much fun. It's not just
it has to be fun, otherwise the kids won't play.
Oh, you know, I had a retired GP who was referred to me with a chronic tennis elbow, keeping him awake at night, and he came in expecting to have frictions and ultrasound, the usual physio treatment. And I said to him, okay, we're going to do something a bit different. I'm not going to touch your elbow. I'm going to examine your elbow, but I'm not going to touch it. And
I'm glad you created that distinction. If someone comes in with a tennis elbow and you don't at least examine it,
yeah,
they are pissed off. But if you examine and say, now when we work to help it, we won't touch it, they're okay. But if you don't actually first check it, you're doing them a disservice, and yourself.
Absolutely. And he was beautifully tender all along the muscles here and in here and everything. So it was a perfect one. And you just pray it would work this time as it's done before. And with him, it was just fantastic, because I was treating his opposite hip and he's thinking, what the hell is going on? This is ridiculous. What a waste of time and money. And then by the end of it, we retested all his resisted tests, palpation, and he was pain-free. And he was, this is ridiculous. He was walking around my clinic pressing, thinking, well, you haven't even touched it. And it was great. And we had such a laugh over it. And he really bought into the whole thing. And just think what you can do. You think how many times we spent hours ultrasounding, frictioning, steroid injections, and he was pain-free, and we didn't even touch his elbow. It was so much fun. I loved it.
but those are the things that you know. It's so weird, for all of how clever we are as human beings, how difficult a time we have trying to wrap our heads around that. And yet when it even for us, and I own that even for me, sometimes I'll be doing something and that little voice of doubt will cry bullshit. There's no way that you did that and it did that. It's an illusion. You know, I've had people, I had someone once say to me, I understand what you do now when you teach. And I was like, awesome, tell me, I'd like to learn too. You do wake hypnosis. I said, what? Wake hypnosis. You hypnotize the whole room, thinking I'm going to be insulted. I'm like, holy crap, I can do wake hypnosis? That's another thing I can do. It could, but that's how they slept better at night. you must be hypnotizing us because there's no way what I saw was possible unless I was hypnotized. Okay. But the question is, what happens if it just was possible? You know, what else? Because then you can go, well, if that's possible, what else could be possible? And that's that, like, holy crap. Well, almost anything, I suppose. Yeah, but we don't know. But I want to be there when someone finds the next new thing. So if you were somebody watching this who had no idea what Be Activated was, and let's say they're a therapist, and what would you say to them? You know, by the way, if someone's actually listened to our whole chat so far, then they might be interested already. Because if we were talking absolute crap, they already would have signed off and gone to do something else, gone to find some evidence-based practice or something like that.
Well,
what would you say to them?
I say, first thing, evidence-based practice is killing our profession. I think we need doctors and medics to go out there and test stuff evidence-based, maybe blood cells, stuff like that. But physios and therapists, it's the worst thing. It's all about what's in our minds and in our hands and in our eyes, and what we see and what we feel and what we listen. That's the key. So this evidence-based is just killing everything, absolutely everything, in my opinion. Yeah. So that's the first thing I say. And muscle activation that you've created is just, it's just the most amazing, different way to look at the body as a whole, not to just go to where the symptoms are and treat the symptoms, but to work out what's caused the problem in the first place. So not just the joint above the joint you're treating or the joint below, or look at their biomechanics, but look at the nitty gritty of where it all stems from how the body functions, how the neurology affects everything, how our breathing affects everything. And suddenly it's so much more interesting, it's so much more exciting, and it makes so much more sense. But what you have to do is take that leap of faith to say that maybe, as you've said before, all that we know maybe isn't correct. And a lot of people don't like to change. They don't like the feeling of change, and they'll say some people I know who've been on courses will say, well, yes, I do the psoas and the glutes a bit, or I'll do the quads point if the quads is weak. They've missed the whole point. They've missed the whole thing of it. Everybody has to get that zone 1, the breathing, the psoas, the glutes, because that's what everything is based on. And you can sell that to patients easily. That's not a tough one. And even
it's an easy sell because they can feel it.
Absolutely.
I think that's awesome.
I think sometimes integrating it can be difficult to begin with, because if someone comes in, I don't know, say someone comes in with an OA knee, and you start off by getting them to breathe, you've got to justify why you're doing that. But it's just practice, and you find ways to explain how things work, and everybody explains it in a slightly different way, but whatever works for you is what counts, really.
Yeah, well, I think that's also important, that you're still allowed to have your own identity with them. We don't want a bunch of robots all doing the same thing, because we're human beings dealing with human beings, and we bring our stuff whether we like it or not. But we bring our experience, our language, So I don't want to say you have to say it this way, because what if you don't? I find that having conversations around the world, the most amazing thing is the different use of words. Or what I've found in the UK particularly, you guys have created about 50 new words just for COVID. There's bubbles, and there's this one, and it's like that. And you're saying, oh yeah, no, this one bubble, blah. I'm like, whoa, what the hell's a bubble? Well, don't you know? Well, no, because we're not doing bubbles here. What is a bubble? And so it's all of those interesting ideas of bring yourself and your best version of yourself, and then we can really have some fun.
Definitely.
Awesome. Thank you, Sue.